Well, good evening, and thanks for joining us. Tonight, my name's Kevin Carroll. I am the Matoaca District Board of Supervisors representative. I represent you, the people. I'm joined tonight by Matt Harris, Gerard Durkin, and our chairman of the school board, Ryan Harter. You may hear from Ryan in a little bit. You know, due to COVID-19, we've all had to change the way we communicate. I want to assure you that you will have the opportunity to ask questions during the meeting via Facebook Live or through our blueprint. We're also simulcasting this on YouTube and local public broadcasting. As an example, if you have Xfinity Comcast, you can watch the meeting on Channel 98. If for some reason your question is answered, but you would like more information, you can contact us via email or call. You can view the budget at blueprint.chesterfield.gov. or email at blueprint@chesterfield.gov, or you'll email myself directly at carrollkevin@chesterfield.gov. I highly recommend going to blueprint.chesterfield. You'll find a tremendous amount of information is provided about the budget and what the budget priorities are. I highly recommend it. It's a lot of great information. The focus of tonight's meeting, as advertised, will be the budget. I believe this is the fourth of 5 public meetings being held by each Board of Supervisors member. It's our way of reaching out to the community and to present to you our vision for not only the next fiscal year, but we are proposing in the future for countywide capital improvements. Again, the purpose of the meeting is twofold. First, to provide information to the community to what the board and staff have been working on in the budget over the past year, and second, to get your input on what we're proposing in the budget. This is part of our ongoing budget process that the county engages in each year. I think it's important, quite frankly, to get the input of the people who are paying the taxes that we are spending. I think allocating the hard-earned dollars that you pay in the form of taxes is, quite frankly, our biggest responsibility as a board. I hope that during the presentation, if you have any questions, you feel free to ask. I believe it's part of my job as your representative to make sure that we are fiscally responsible and still provide, the excellent quality service to the community that you as people of Chesterfield County expect. So one of the focuses of the budget this year specifically is how we're addressing salary compression for public safety and our teachers. Investing in our frontline workers is an investment that is worthwhile. We're making a long overdue commitment to our employees to make sure that the county is providing a competitive wage to our valued workers for the market that we're in. Our police, firefighters, sheriffs, employees, and teachers, they provide a vital service to our community. And so this board has collectively made it one of our priorities in the budget. Quite frankly, and not to be critical, but we as a county have fallen behind over time in addressing pay and benefits, and which has resulted in some employee turnover and the loss of valuable people to protect our community and teach our children is important. We need to retain the intellectual property and the experience of both our police officers, firefighters, sheriff's deputies, teachers, and quite frankly, all of our county employees. That's how we can provide the excellent service that you expect. The third leg, we did 2 pay studies in the past year, one for teacher pay and the other one addressed public safety pay, and we'll also be doing another pay study in the coming year for the rest of our county employees that were not addressed in those 2 pay studies. Our public meeting will be held March 24th here. Again, all of the ways I told you earlier, you could watch this meeting. You can also watch our public meeting. We'll have a public hearing on the budget, like I said, on the 24th. And then the supervisors will again meet on April 7th, 2021, where we will actually vote on the budget. This is the time, if you have specific questions or if you have specific concerns about how we're spending your dollars, to reach out to us. Of course, I encourage that year-round, quite frankly, but what you're going to hear tonight is what we're proposing. I think that staff has done an excellent job putting this together. And right now, what I'm going to do is give my partner with the school board from Matoaca. Ryan, an opportunity to say a few words.
Well, thank you, Mr. Carroll. Good evening, everyone. I'm honored to be here. My name is Ryan Harter. I am the chairman of the Chesterfield County School Board, and I also represent the Matoaca District. As Mr. Carroll said, this past year, we have made a number of corrections and moved forward with some initiatives to make sure that our teachers are taken care of. I'm very proud of that and the work that the Chesterfield County School Board and the Board of Supervisors have undertaken to ensure that we can make that happen for everyone and make sure that Chesterfield remains a first choice community. So I'll be happy to answer any questions this evening, and once again, thank you for having me.
Hi, Ryan, thanks. I appreciate you being here. And now I'm going to turn it over to Matt Harris and his team to go through the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. That's an excellent introduction, so I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the presentation. Mr. Durkin and myself will walk you through a series of slides. It's meant to just be, again, an overview of the fiscal 22 budget. As Mr. Carroll stated, can't emphasize it enough, the blueprint site, which is up year-round, has all of this information and more. It's about a 20-slide deck. We'll run through that in the next few minutes, but it's a subset of about 100 slides that were presented just a couple weeks ago in this room. So if you want to see the full presentation or really drill down into any specific topic, all of those materials are out there, as well as the full proposed budget document, anything that you would need to know. And again, that email address, blueprint@chesterfield.gov, is up and running, not only now, but year-round. If you have a specific question or just can't navigate through the website or can't find exactly what you're looking for, certainly encourage you to check that out. So let's jump right into the meat of it. So we'd like to start off any presentation on the budget. I think it's important to understand the underlying economic fundamentals. Can we reasonably make a case that the economy that underpins all of this can support the spending plan that's being proposed to the Board of Supervisors? And just a little housekeeping note on that, because I think it bears repeating. Where we are in the process is we have gone through the fall months, really late summer into fall, even with the midst of COVID, gotten feedback from the community. The county administrator gathers all of that information and makes a proposal that was done, again, a couple weeks ago to the full Board of Supervisors. It includes the school board's proposed budget that they send over to the county administrator. He gathers all of that together, makes this full proposal, which you're seeing the summary of tonight, and that's what's before the Board of Supervisors. So there will be, some amendments to this, I'm sure, some tweaks here and there, but it really is that important part of the journey where we get to hear feedback from the community on this specific proposal. So that's just sort of where we are in the process. But this chart, I think, is a good summation of kind of where we are economically. Now, you see, you're showing a long period of time dating back to the last recession, which hopefully we can stop talking about now, but it does serve a nice, useful comparison. You see an increase, you're plotting unemployment, you see an increase depending on which line you're looking at. Unemployment raises, between 7 to 10%, and then it takes years, multiple years to kind of get back into that 3 to 4%, what's considered to be sort of a normal rate of unemployment, but a very gradual recovery from what was then known as the Great Recession. A year ago, almost to the day, we started getting those first data points from COVID-19, and we saw some pretty shocking things. The unemployment rate nationally, locally, state level, wherever you want to look at, shot up, depending, you see here on the state particular piece, and the Richmond city number up over 14%. And that happened is just not over a matter of weeks or months, but really overnight, that unemployment rate as the shutdowns occurred. So you saw that absolute spike in unemployment. The shape of, regardless of which level you're looking at, looks very much the same, unlike anything that we've seen before. So that's the atmosphere by which we were making a budget a year ago. The good news is the shape of the recovery looks very different as it did in 2008 2008 through the middle of that decade, it came down almost as quickly as it went up, and it has settled not exactly where it was. Some of the rates were below 3%, but we're back in a 4.5% range. Chesterfield in particular at 4.3. Again, a normal rate, still a little bit elevated from where we were, and we recognize there's still portions of our local community, our local workforce, small businesses that are struggling with it. But overall, it was a shock to the system, and it came back and moderated very quickly. That being said, we do feel that the economic fundamentals, although this is a very strange graph and probably will never see anything like that again, hopefully, the economic fundamentals are sound enough to support what you're going to see the rest of the presentation. So I think it's just really important to sort of understand that. In particular, consumer spending and the residential real estate market in Chesterfield County, which are two major sources of revenue, are doing quite well, and we'll touch on that as we move through the remainder of the presentation. So a little bit of, I think this is maybe one of the more important slides in the entire deck, and it's a lot of numbers, and they're less important what specifically are, but I'm going to walk you through the storyboard piece of this, and it relates to the slide that we just looked at. FY20 on the far left-hand side, so we're talking about fiscal 22. We jumped the calendar year by 6 months. So fiscal 20 is the budget, the pre-COVID budget, settled in $733 million. We sat in this room, a little less than a year ago, a little more than a year ago, I guess now, and we proposed a budget to the Board of Supervisors. Same process we are now, pre-COVID, $40 million increase in the budget, 5% growth, very normal year. COVID overnight, that spike happens, the world shuts down, everyone knows that story. We cut over $50 million from that original proposal a year ago and actually ended up $12 million below the budget from the prior year, about almost a 2% decrease. We came back, and that was a very conservative approach, particularly on residential real estate valuation. Didn't know how consumer spending was going to fare. Again, all we had was there were those initial data points, unemployment rates spiking into the double digits. Took a very conservative approach, put a lot of folks on furlough, shut down everything that we could, and from a discretionary perspective, not knowing where it was going to settle. The economic news, did settle out. We got a sense of where we were, got our feet underneath of us. We came back mid-year, as Mr. Carroll said, really as kind of a down payment on the 22 budget, put the public safety pay plan in place the middle of this fiscal year, back in around December timeframe, recognizing that we had more revenue than we would have anticipated. That's why you see that revised number back around 753, 754. And then we sit here tonight with a overall spending plan for the general fund, and I'll touch on exactly what that means in just a second, at 806. The reason we go through that is because it's a big increase when you look at 806 versus 721, and there's been some headlines that try to make a lot out of that. I think the important thing to understand is the way that this is rolled out, the way we had to rebuild the 21 budget almost overnight, taking a very conservative approach. It's effectively a 2-year increase from 721 to 806. Percentage-wise, it's about 11%. You average that out, it's about 5.5. It's about what we would have said we would have been if not for COVID a year ago. So it's a big increase. It's a big increase from a nominal perspective, percentage perspective. But when you look at it just over a 2-year budget, as if we hadn't done anything for 21 and we're just 720 versus 806, it makes a lot more sense. So that's the reason we run through that. A little more in-depth, a little more detail on the revenue side. You can see our major sources of revenue, real estate taxes being the top of that stack, and the second one being local sales and use taxes. And that's where the growth has occurred. You see out of $84 million proposed increase here, you got 55 from those two sources alone. Home values in the county increase on average 4.25%. Sales tax, which is again a good marker for consumer spending, up 10% year over year. Again, that's not something we would have said in this room and ever anticipated, but I think what we've seen, Mr. Carroll referenced it in his opening, is folks staying closer to home, recognizing that there's a lot of options, whether it be through retail, dining, whatever it might be, a lot of those dollars staying home in Chesterfield County. We have 350,000 people strong, and I think we've shown our muscle from consumer spending over this last year, and you see a large increase there in sales tax. What's not in this from a revenue perspective, we'll touch on it at the very end as well, is a large increase in federal monies. There are no CARES dollars, and CARES is just a acronym that DC came up with. There's a number of stimulus, fiscal injection programs, if you will, that have come down, some to schools, some to the county, and there's more to come. There are more checks in the mail. But this budget does not rely on any of those one-time funds to make any of the things that we're going to talk about during the remainder of the presentation possible. And that's really important to note. We are spending those monies. We're figuring out ways to help small businesses, to help households, to help the organization, help public safety, schools. But we're doing it on a one-time basis and investing them in a one-time way so that we're not getting ourselves onto those dollars in a recurring fashion that would cause a problem somewhere down the line. I'll touch on this real quick. From a revenue perspective, you go back 1 second, you see total revenue from state and federal at $82 million, only a $2 million increase from the prior year. And on the state piece, again, very little money flows through the general fund. And again, I mentioned a second ago, the general fund is a main operating fund from the county. And we'll see a little further breakdown in just a second, but what's housed in there is all the money for public safety, all the money for kind of our quality of life areas, being parks, libraries, things like social services, all the administrative functions, and then all of the local funding for our school division. The school division receives direct receipt from the state for the rest of that, but it's all of the tax dollars that are invested in the school division. That'll make more sense when we go through a couple of subsequent charts, but the slide here really is to talk a moment about the state revenue component of our budget. It's a much, much larger topic we can cover in one slide, and I'm just going to hit on it. It's more of a preview of coming attractions to say the following. Things that happen downtown, things that are on statewide referendums, things that happen in the General Assembly have a real impact on the bottom line here in Chesterfield County. We've highlighted a few things, whether they be expenditure mandates that have come down from Richmond, or whether they've been state impacts to local revenues, and I won't go through all of those, but if you take, this is just a small sample, a little quick survey of some of the things that have happened over the last 5 to 10 years, the effective increase for us is $13.6 million to the bottom line, just in this handful of items. That $13.6 million, that's $13.6 million that could have gone into the classroom, into public safety, or alternatively, that's 4 cents on the rate. We could have effectively a 91 cent tax rate if not for these things that have come down for Richmond. And it's not a up or down vote on them in particular, just pointing out that things that happen at the state level have a real impact on us here locally. And we're going to do more as we move forward to point those items out. I think this is an area where the county and the schools are very much aligned. The school division gets hit with many of these mandates as well that very often do not come with any funding. So let's take a little bit closer look at the major components of the spending plan. Like I mentioned, the school piece, which you see there in the lime green at $810 million, that is made up of those two pieces, the local tax dollars and then the state monies. It's about a 50-50 share that make up that $810. So the largest part of our overall consolidated budget is the school piece at over $800 million. General fund, when you take out that local school transfer, at $461, and then another piece we don't talk as much about, but certainly something that you use every single day, our water and sewer service, our utility division at $142 million, just to give you some scale of the major components of this budget. Before I turn it over to Mr. Durkin and kind of get into some of the specifics from a spending initiative perspective, just a couple of things, a couple of notes. What are those major forces? What are the kinds of things we look at when we go in and build any particular budget? COVID, the weather, it's been sort of a crazy year with all of those phenomena, but it's not something that just happens to us. We want to make sure that we're taking a close look at that and that we're learning from all of those items and that we're reflecting that in an upcoming budget. COVID happened to everyone. but we feel like there's a lot of things to learn. There's a lot of feedback. There's a lot of things that we understand about the community preferences, and really things that the community learn about their own preferences, particularly when it comes to parks and libraries and how valuable a library is. It's not just a place where you go and check out books. It's a learning center. It's a warming station. During a power outage, it's a place where elderly folks can go and register for a vaccine. It's a small business hub. So we learned and reflected on all the things that have happened over the course of the last 12 months, and you'll see those highlighted in Mr. Durkin's portion of the presentation in just a moment. Demographics, always going to be something that we're going to take a look at. Single-family growth, we're looking at new housing units put on the ground. You see a couple of things here. Again, a longer time series back, 05, 08. You see some growth, annualized growth figures there that are 2x what we're expecting or what we saw during calendar year 2020. And by and large, that's unsustainable growth in terms of being able to keep up from an infrastructure and services perspective. But the real estate market was doing some zany things back in that time period from a valuation and from a development perspective. It calms down, probably below where we'd like to see it. But over the last 4 or 5 years, we've averaged right around that 1.25%, which is a really good number. That's around our long-term average. So while we are seeing growth, and depending on where you live in the county, Matoaca District has its fair share of new single-family housing. But overall, when you look at the entirety of Chesterfield County from a percentage perspective, we are right on our numbers. You want to see good, healthy growth. You don't want to see that close to 3%, but 1.25 plus or minus is a nice, healthy range. So that's important to keep our finger on that pulse. And then we recognize in the bottom chart here the fact that our demographics from an age group perspective continue to shift. We do have growth in our student enrollment, and Mr. Harter can certainly attest to that. But I think what this chart shows is even though enrollment has grown over the period that's plotted here from 05 to current, the fact that our 65 and older crowd continue to move here and stay here. That's our largest demographic section in Chesterfield County. I think is a real testament, as Dr. Casey said, folks wanting to put down roots, and not just for that time in their life when they're raising kids, but they want to stay here. The grandkids, I think, is a demographic factor we're seeing nationwide. That really is the anchor for where folks want to stay. So as we continue to have more kids, now we're retaining those grandparents. And that's relevant for the following reason. We have to make sure we continue to invest in schools, and no budget in Chesterfield's history does that like this one, but we have to find that balance and recognize that we do have a very large portion of our households that don't actually have a direct kid in CCPS. They may have a grandkid, and we recognize that, but you've got to figure out how you balance out your service portfolio. And Mr. Durkin will touch on a few of those examples as well. So overall, how are the dollars invested in this plan? Almost 80 cents out of every dollar is the easiest way to think of it. This is a great chart. Invested in education, public safety, and infrastructure. It was 76 cents a year ago, and because of the pay plans, primarily in public safety and for our teachers, we're able to move that 2 cents. That doesn't sound like a lot, but that's really a seismic shift when you're talking about hundreds of $millions dollars to be able to move that needle further closer to 80 cents. So that is where tax dollars are invested in this county, and continue to grow that fraction as we move forward. We're able to do that because, as you see to the right-hand side of this chart, the general government slice that's in the light blue at 6 cents, meaning that 6 cents out of every dollar we spend supports administrative functions, IT, legal, purchasing, on down the line. All of those things we do for just 6 cents on the dollar. So our overhead, those non-direct services that we provide, we keep that very, very minimal, and that allows us to invest the bulk of the tax dollars that we're entrusted with into those areas, such as roads, schools, and police and fire. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Durkin, who is going to walk you through some of the specific spending choices in this plan.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. As been said before, the fiscal year 2022 budget that's before you today really builds on the investments that the board had made with the amendments to the fiscal year 2021 budget. But before we get into the themes of the budget, one of the things that we do every year is, look at our base, our existing resources. And this year was no different, even with the extra challenges that we faced. Simply restoring those targeted reductions that we made wasn't enough. It's not what's expected of us, especially with our service demands having changed. And we used our investment in technology over the last year to do some long-term analysis before coming to you, the taxpayer, for more resources. And through that endeavour, we were able to find efficiencies of about $1.9 million. And the chart that you see before you right there represents 4 of the largest components of that. With our general services, from insourcing to our real estate assessment office using investments in mass appraisal systems, to fire, in-housing their training, but also being able to free up staff to go back on the front line, and libraries moving from their part-time to full-time ratio that I'll touch on in a second. And the chart you see to the right shows you the total request for these 4 alone was $1.6 million. And then with some reallocated savings, we were able to find about $914,000 of that to be reallocated. So it's a net cost to the general fund of about $645,000. So the themes of the budget really coalesced around 6 that you see before you: recognising the workforce, investing in our children's future, continuing our commitment to public safety, enhancing the quality of life, diversifying and bolstering our economic base, and strengthening investment in infrastructure and technology. And so really, as the board has pointed out, this is the year of the workforce. Our employees have really pivoted to other services, especially that we couldn't provide some with COVID. A lot of telehealth through our mental health services, and our frontline responders really stepped up and really showed the community the best and enduring qualities of our workforce. And so this budget, first of all, to them is a big thank you for everything over the last year. As Mr. Carroll pointed out earlier, the plan fully funds the public safety pay plan. It costs about $13.8 million in year 1, covering 1,300 employees. And then also on the skills side, working with our school board and superintendent and staff, also helps implement the teacher pay study, impacting over 4,700 teachers and other staff, costing about $23.2 million, with salaries increasing on average by about 5.5%. So between those 2 plans, the investment's about $37 million. For our general government employees, we have a 2% mid-year raise. And one of the things that the board took action on this month was to also begin that 3rd final pay plan for the rest of the general employees and school staff. And we're also able in our 22 budget to restore some of the career development and training programs to help retain the best and brightest here in the county. And then also absorbing the ongoing cost to telework is going to be a big component of every employer going forward, and the county is no different in that respect. I'm investing in our children's future, as I said before, but bears repeating. It helps fully fund the teacher pay plan and recognises the dedication of our teachers and our school employees to our children. Our local transfers are increasing $18 million over fiscal year 21, the largest increase in history. But it also includes funding $4 million for differentiated financial support for schools and staffing support, recognising that no 2 schools and no 2 students in the Chesterfield school system are the same. And also continues on preventative and major maintenance, just under $1 million. And that comes on the heels of the $58 million investment that we're able to make, capitalising on the county's AAA bond rating. Continuing our commitment to public safety, with our public safety pay plan now implemented, we're able to turn our resources more to their operations, and this budget does just that. For the fire department, it includes 20 positions to fully staff the new Midlothian fire station, the ladder truck and a medic addition to the system. It fully funds the replacement of the Matoaca fire station, I believe the oldest in the system at 69 years old. It implements the new police deployment plan, the first major update to the command structures in 1989, with 9 positions costing $1.8 million. And also includes funding to expand the police service aid program for 3 police service aides and 1 supervisory sergeant, continuing on that pipeline that we started in fiscal year 2020, as well as continuing funding for 15 grant positions that were approved in fiscal year 21. For our bond referendum that Mr. Harris will go into in more detail later, it identifies 4 police stations, 2 fire station replacements and 2 renovations. And for our sheriff's office, adds 4 new sheriff positions to allow for staffing flexibility and facility maximisation. Enhancing the quality of life, this is something that's really come into focus in the last year. Some of the events that we've taken for granted have either been curtailed or we've not been able to do them. And typically, you'll see in our budgets, we've got 3 main pillars, public safety, education, and transportation. I think it would be fair to say that we could add quality of life to that to make it the 4th pillar. And our libraries and parks, as you can see in this slide, really have redefined and helped the quality of life in the county. Our library systems have transformed from a place where you just go and check out books to learning pods, places where you can register for vaccinations, warming centres with the recent ice storm that we had. And with the fiscal year 22 budget, we really have committed to moving that part-time to full-time ratio. I'm going to add 17 positions between the fiscal 21 amendments and the proposed budget that you see before you today. On the capital side for library, we're proposing to invest $52 million to replace 2 libraries and renovate an additional 2 libraries. And for our park system, they've taken on an additional 19 sites since 2011. And recognising that, we're proposing to add another $1.1 million to establish a new athletic field crew and principal maintenance workers, which is the largest investment in their staffing in over a decade. And then for River City Sportsplex, the capital plan proposes an additional $5.2 million in capital investment. And that comes on the heels of the $3 million that the board invested with our fiscal year 21 amendments. So just to give some kind of scope, in the next 3 fiscal years, a total of just over $8.2 million will be invested in that facility, not positioning it just as like a regional leader in sports tourism, but up and down the eastern seaboard of the United States. And then finally, there's an additional $4.5 million to renovate the old Beulah Elementary School, to a Parks headquarters, community centre and recreation space. And this budget and Parks investment recognises, it's not just investment in new areas and new neighbourhoods, but well-established ones in the community too. And so diversifying and bolstering our economic base, that's one of the things we recognise the financial burden that our residents and businesses have faced over the last year. One of the things that this budget has is it fully funds the complete zoning ordinance rewrite, which hasn't been updated since 1970. The businesses that we're trying to attract now are different from those from 50 years ago. But the plan is also mindful of county businesses. We're proposing to raise the exemption threshold on our business licence from $300,000 to $400,000, exempting an additional 400 businesses from the tax and reducing the bill for another 3,200 county businesses. In all, if this passes, it would be about 2/3 of all businesses would only pay the $10 fee. Additionally, it proposes raising the personal property exemption from $1,000 to $1,500, the first adjustment that we'll have made since 1998, which alleviates the personal property tax bill for approximately 14,000 vehicles. And it also expands the tax relief for the elderly and disabled program by factoring inflation into income eligibility and targeting relief where it's needed most. One of the things that's being proposed, the 100% threshold relief would be rising from $28,000 to $31,500. And it would also include, as I say, adjustments to the cost of living so that those that qualify today won't be negatively impacted by those adjustments going forward. But we're also proposing to add a $3,000 cap to control the costs, but also to make sure that the relief goes to those who need it the most. And as part of the amendments that were passed the last election, it also includes an additional $1 million for the veteran program to bring it to a total of $7 million. So in strengthening our investment in infrastructure, we are proposing a large increase in our sidewalks and trail budget. A program to be $19 million over the next 5 years, starting with $2 million in fiscal year 22, recognizing that people in the community need to get out and have spaces to walk with friends and family. The plan also reflects a new capital funding source, the Central Virginia Transportation Authority. Thanks to this, there'll be an additional investment of just over $116 million over the next 5 years. And our transportation budget component of the CIP totals approximately 44% of our CIP, so it's the largest component. And this revenue source enables us to actually start on those projects that you'll see in the back of our budget document with the unfunded appendix just coming over $4 billion to really kickstart some of those projects that may have laid dormant for the next few years. As ever, the budget continues to adhere to all our major maintenance policies, and it sets the foundation for a November 2022 bond referendum, which we'll go into shortly. Also recognizing this big influx of capital investment on our operational side, we're proposing to add additional positions for our capital projects management staff as well as our building and ground staff. And the chart you see to the left really shows the transportation program both for fiscal year 22 and the total over the 5-year plan. For fiscal year 22, it totals just over $43 million with 211.7 over the 5-year plan, and you can see those broken out there. The one thing I will point out with the revenue sharing line item is we always make sure that we can take advantage of matching dollars, which we are doing here with this plan with the state. So if we're putting in $5 million, they'll contribute, another 5 for a total of 10, and over the 5-year plan it comes to approximately $50 million. And with that, I will turn it back to Mr. Harris for the bond referendum.
I'm going to walk you through this chart, and I think this probably addresses several of the questions we've seen pop up here tonight and in prior meetings. So we've added this slide because I think it just brings some clarity to this important topic. So when we say referendum, all we're referring to is a ballot initiative that shows up about every 8 to 10 years, depending, that gives the county the approval it needs to go out and use its full faith and credit to put infrastructure in place throughout the community. It allows us to, the county, as well as the utility system, both have a perfect credit rating from all the municipal agencies. It allows us to borrow money at the lowest cost, which keeps taxes low and keeps the dollars that we do bring in more on the service side, as opposed to paying principal and interest on these facilities. So bricks and mortar are always part of our business, but we want to be able to do it at the lowest cost, and having an approved referendum is really important to being able to do that. So when we say referendum, that's generally what we're referring to. We had originally, prior to COVID, last January or so, talked about having a referendum as early as this November. Given the fact a lot of the factors have been in this presentation and a few other things, we've now decided to postpone that 1 year to November of 2022, calendar year 2022. That means that while it's on the ballot a little bit later, county and schools will not lose any momentum in terms of the planning it takes to pull off and execute a referendum. All in all, we're looking at about a $450 million bond package, 300 of it being dedicated to school facilities, which I'm not going to go into as much detail here. What you see on your screen is $150 million to the county side of that, and how we would invest that over the 7 years or so. All of it's approved up front, which has been another question that we've gotten. It's a good one. So you get all the authority up front, you sell the bonds for the specific projects over usually about a 7 to 8 year window. And you want to stagger the sales. The question we've got, why not just sell it all today? Interest rates are low. Well, as soon as it's just as you take out a mortgage on a home or a car payment, you're going to start those payments day one. So we have to be able to feather that in a way that we can afford those annual mortgage payments. But because we're able to go out and borrow under the county's good name, we can get those very low rates. So summation, November of 22, we expect this to be on the ballot, about a $450 million proposal. The school program really focused this time around the middle school level with some continued enhancements, I think, for some elementary schools dealing with some capacity issues in a few pockets. And on the county side, a very balanced plan. You see down in the chart in the bottom of this slide, $150 million spread across a number of categories, but not overly weighted in any one. Parks and libraries accounting for $70 million, almost half of the referendum. I think that, goes well with what Mr. Durkin said, really recognizing and folks making a push for parks and libraries to be a larger part of our annual budget. And COVID certainly has a factor there. Fire stations, we've got some spots where we need to expand, and then we're going to go back and have a nice healthy mix to go in and renovate and rehab some existing stations. The police stations, which is not something that's been part of referendums in the past, We're in lease arrangements in those facilities currently, and this would convert those facilities to a permanent county presence in strategic locations that fit our modern footprint. So that would be a real advancement there. And then you see a small piece of roads really as a complement to all of the transportation funding that Mr. Durkin touched on in his part of the presentation. What's shown in the larger part of the slide is just kind of that rhythm that we would expect to have over that 7-year period. And between now and November of '22, we will get into more specifics about these projects. There's information, kind of the candidate projects that fit each one of those boxes in the budget materials that are posted online. But there will be Facebooks, in-persons, and all sorts of other interaction to, when we put that final list out there, get the community feedback and input on that before it shows up on a ballot so we know exactly that we are aligned with the community's needs and expectations on this important initiative. One real quick note, we mentioned utilities being $142 million to this overall plan. I think it's the thing that folks always want to understand is what's going to happen to my water bill. So this chart shows you average monthly increase expected to be, and again, that's kind of like that average home price. If you use more or less water, you got to scale it accordingly, but our average bill increased by about $1.50, each month. You see down at the bottom in the bar charts where that would put us compared to our regional peers, even with the fiscal '22 increase built in here compared to the existing rates in the other 3 localities, still considerably below that. Again, Mr. Hayes and his team operate a very, very efficient system. They make very smart investments, and there is a small increase here, but again, very competitive regionally, and you get a very high quality service here in terms of Chesterfield Water and Sewer. So looking ahead, and then we'll transition to any final comments from Mr. Carroll, and if there's any questions that have found their way in. Again, no CARES funding, that's the federal money. I think you're going to see the school division and the county come back at subsequent meetings, probably in either late April and May, to bring that information to the community. We don't have the rule books for how those dollars can be spent. We know that there are monies coming to us. But once we have a better understanding of what you can do with those, we'll certainly bring those concepts back to the community. That's not part of what you're seeing tonight. That is a coming attraction. One more virtual meeting tomorrow night for the Bermuda District. Again, if you missed this or you have a family member, friend, coworker that missed it, wants to have a chance to see it live, you can do that tomorrow, whether you live in Bermuda or not. Our blueprint, chesterfield.gov, that's up 24 hours a day. That's just a wide open email. You can ask questions or your comments about anything that you've seen here tonight. We also have a specific budget feedback form that you can fill out if you'd rather just leave a little bit more commentary. So there's lots of ways to do that. And then our public portion of the budget process culminates in this room on Wednesday night, a series of public hearings about the various pieces of the budget that you've learned about here tonight. You can still sign up for that, or you can leave, again, virtual feedback for those that prefer to do that and cannot or don't want to show up in person. That option is available to you as well. And then we will wrap the process up on April the 7th with budget adoption. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Carroll, see if he has any other comments.
Thank you, Matt. Couple things. Number one, I want to thank the staff for all the hard work that they've put in to put this together. Really crunching the numbers and taking a look at, trying to meet what we believe are going to be the expectations. Is that a question that popped up? You want to answer it? Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
I had a couple questions starting to trickle in here. So the first one's about the proposed tax rate on county real property, and again, how the assessments affect that. So we'll jump into that. This budget, as proposed by the county administrator, is balanced at 95 cents, which is our existing rate. However, as we touched on in the course of the presentation, the average tax bill, kind of like we talked about on the utility side, will increase on average about 4.25% because the real estate conditions, there's a tremendous demand for housing in Chesterfield County. We've seen COVID or no COVID, folks wanting to come here, safe community, great schools, all the quality of life pieces that we've talked about in this presentation. So we continue to be a leading destination in the region and outside of the region, really, for folks who want to move and put down roots here in Chesterfield County. So that is causing some upward pressure on home prices, but 4.25% is within that range. We like to see that in 3 to 4%. We don't want to see double-digit increases like we did back in 05 to 08. So we're like we are in terms of housing growth, the number of folks moving here, the valuation changes also in a sustainable range. So the average tax bill does increase by that, a little over that 4% mark. So that will, have an impact on the tax bill, but the rate remains at 95 cents. I think we've made statements in the 3 prior Facebook meetings, certainly in the county administrator's materials that he submitted to the Board of Supervisors, that we will continue to take a look at that residential real estate rate on an annualized basis. We would, if we can have opportunities because assessments are trending above that 3 or 4% range, or there's just other opportunities because maybe other revenue sources, maybe we have some economic development successes where we can balance out and make sure we're being attentive to all the service needs of the community, but recognizing that, we want to remain competitive on that real estate tax rate, make sure that we're keeping the tax burden on our citizens' businesses as low as we can, still delivering that high quality of life. That is something that we remain committed to over the course of this 5-year plan, not proposed for the budget that's before you tonight. The second question up here, how's tax relief going to change in fiscal 22? I think Mr. Durkin did a good job touching on that. Really the broadest package of tax relief that we've ever proposed as part of any budget, not at the real estate tax rate level. That remains a future goal for us over this 5-year window. But for fiscal 22 in particular, really going and looking at those groups most in need. So targeted tax relief, veterans, our senior citizens, our lower income households, and our small businesses. Those 4 pieces, all with a large portion of this overall tax package, targeting them, trying to, if we're going to spend tax relief dollars, making sure it gets to those who need it the most. And then if we can come back in a subsequent year and look at the real estate rate, maybe on multiple occasions, we will continue to do that. Third question up on the screen right now, talking about how much funding is dedicated to sidewalks. So this budget is a little bit different in some of its predecessors. There's a $2 million dedicated and what we call community connectivity. And it's really a broader concept than just sidewalks. It's really about looking for those opportunities for folks to get out and mainly pedestrian-focused facilities that maybe connect a neighborhood to a school or to a commercial center. Again, I think that's one of the major things we've seen in COVID. Folks want to get out, they want to be active, they want to be able to walk around, get that fresh air. So this is a $2 million investment in that community connectivity program. We grow that to $5 million a year by the end of the program. And within the broader transportation funding envelope, there are lots of other opportunities. Mr. Smith and Mr. Epps and his team always looking for those areas where we can put a few local dollars down, maybe have a grant program matching state funding, federal funding. So there will be inevitably more investment in those sidewalks and trails, but this has a dedicated $2 million for sidewalks and trails. Again, that grows up to $5 million a year by the end of the 5 years. With that, Mr. Carroll, I think that's all the questions that we've received thus far.
Thank you, Matt. There's a lot of other things, obviously, that go on within the county that are not part of what we've discussed tonight. Last year, we had historic flooding, as an example, that took place in the Matoaca district up off of Otterdale Road, and last year this board approved funds to be able to deal with that and to fix that flooding. We have a lot of older neighborhoods, what Matt was referencing, the sidewalks, a lot of neighborhoods that don't have connectivity, and certainly we want to make sure that it's safe for our people to be able to walk through the neighborhoods and have better mobility. A lot of the new neighborhoods that are developed have sidewalks in them, and there will be some. If you've looked at the school's budget, you'll see there's some new schools that in the next 5 years we're going to be proposing having to build to deal with some of the overcrowding that we have going on in the schools. So there's a lot going on. I want to take an opportunity to address those that are watching and say thank you. And what I mean by that is This last year has been tough. It's been tough for everybody. Parents have had to deal with their children not being in school. They've had to learn how to work differently, teleworking from home, learn new programs. Some of that's been really good in the sense that you've been able to spend more time together with the family. There's been a lot of fear within the community about COVID-19, and certainly we've had a lot of people in our community that have contracted disease, and unfortunately we've had people in our community that have passed away from the disease. But I really think that I got to tell you, proud to be part of this community. The people have really stepped up. You know, everybody's been civil to one another. Everybody utilized the ability to go to Chesterfield Eats and keep our local economy running, keep our restaurants that were struggling in business by shifting and pivoting to takeout and making sure that they would be viable on the outside of this when we get to the end of this and we start getting back to where we can have full capacity. And that's you. People in the community did that. And that's about caring about each other and caring about your community and caring about your neighbor. And there's so many things that happen behind the scenes that people took care of for one another. It goes unsaid sometimes, but I get different emails and people call me and tell me about different things, and it's why Chesterfield County is such a great place to live, work, and raise a family. I want to thank Ryan and the school board for working with us and their staff to generate what we believe is a good school budget that's going to provide needed pay increases, certainly for teachers, but also deal with a lot of other needs that the children will have. I think if Ryan was going to say something else, he would tell you that we're hiring bus drivers, right? So if you're interested in looking for a job, Chesterfield County is hiring bus drivers right now. But, again, thank you to you, the community. Thank you for all of our first responders who didn't get to remote work. They had to go out in the streets every day, our firefighters, our police officers, our sheriff's deputies, and then all of our healthcare workers that were on the front line in the hospitals and the clinics. I think the health district we've really stepped up, the Chesterfield Health District has really stepped up on what we're doing to combat COVID with getting the vaccinations, and now they've opened up another vaccination center down at Virginia State University, which has started out spectacular, almost getting over 2,800 vaccinations a day into the arms of our people to fight this disease, and my understanding is they want to increase that number to up to 6,000 if possible. So if you haven't signed up for it, go to the portal and get signed up if you want to get the vaccination. And what I hope for in the future is that as more shots come in, the health district will start pushing those out, not just to the CVS and the Walmart, which they have, and not just to our own local health center, but also to your doctor's office, so that eventually you'll be able to go to your doctor and get that vaccination as well. Again, this is beginning part of the budget process, I guess, towards our approval. It's not too late to call, not too late to send us information via email with your concerns. I want to thank you again for tuning in tonight, and everybody stay safe, and God bless.